The first time Danny Kowalski held the M3 grease gun, he laughed so hard, he nearly dropped it. This was September 1944, in a replacement depot outside Paris. Danny was 19 years old, fresh from Fort Knox, and he was about to join the 3rd Armored Division as a tank driver. The supply sergeant slapped the weapon into his hands like he was handing him a plunger. Danny turned it over. It was made of stamped sheet metal, welded together with beads, so rough they snagged his sleeve. It had a wire stock that wobbled when he shook it. The whole thing rattled like a box of loose bolts. "Sarge, is this a joke?" The supply sergeant didn't smile. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. "That's your personal weapon. Private. You lose it. You pay for it." $15. Danny blinked. $15. My dad's hunting rifle cost more than that. Your dad's rifle wasn't built by a headlight factory. Sign here. Danny signed. He looked at the stamped metal tube in his hands. It looked like something you'd grease a truck axle with. He'd seen the Thompson submachine guns carried by the paratroopers. Those were weapons. Beautiful walnut stocks, fin barrels. They looked like they belonged in a gangster movie. This thing looked like it belonged in a trash heap. Danny threw it in the bottom of his duffel bag and forgot about it. 3 weeks later, he was assigned to a Sherman tank, commanded by Staff Sergeant Mike O'Malley. O'Malley was a veteran. Normandy, Cobra, the race across France. He had a Purple Heart and a Silver Star and a Thompson submachine gun he'd liberated from a dead paratrooper at St. Alon. O'Malley saw Danny's grease gun on the floor of the tank and kicked it with his boot. "Get that piece of garbage out of my tank." "It's issues, Sarge." "I don't care. It's an insult. This is a fighting vehicle, not a plumber's van." Danny stuffed it under his seat. He didn't argue with O'Malley. Nobody did. By December, they were in Belgium, the Ardennes forest. Everyone said the war would be over by Christmas. The Germans were finished. The tank crews were bored, cold, and counting the days. On the morning of December 16th, Danny woke up to the sound of the world ending. The artillery barrage shattered the forest. Trees exploded into splinters. The ground heaved like an earthquake. Then came the tanks. German tanks, Panthers, Tigers. The entire 5th Panzer Army smashing through the ghost front like a sledgehammer through wet paper. Danny's crew was manning a roadblock outside the town of Saint-Ouen-Vith when the lead Panther appeared through the snow. It was massive. Angled armor painted in winter camouflage, gun barrels swinging toward them like the hand of God. O'Malley screamed into the intercom, "Traverse right!" Gunner, target tank. The 75mm gun barked. The shell bounced off the Panther's glacis plate and screamed into the trees. The Panther's gun flashed. Danny never heard the impact. 1 second, he was gripping the steering levers. The next, he was upside down in a snowbank, ears ringing, lungs burning with cordite smoke. The Sherman was on fire. Black smoke poured from the engine deck. Out! Everybody out. Danny scrambled through the driver's hatch and fell 6 feet into the snow. He looked up. The Panther was 70 yards away, its gun already swinging toward another Sherman. German infantry were moving through the trees on both sides of the road, gray ghosts in the white forest. The crew made it into a drainage ditch. 5 men, O'Malley, Danny, the gunner, a farm kid from Iowa named Hendricks, the loader, Richard from Chicago, and the assistant driver, a replacement named Webb, who'd been with them for less than a week. They were behind enemy lines, cut off. The temperature was 5 degrees below zero. O'Malley had his Thompson. Richie had a carbine. Hendricks had a .45 pistol. Webb had nothing. He'd left his rifle in the burning tank. Danny had the Grace gun. He'd grabbed it without thinking when he bailed out. Now it was in his hands, covered in mud and snow, and he realized with a sick feeling that he'd never even fired the thing. Not once. He didn't know if it worked. He didn't know if it was loaded. The German infantry were sweeping toward them. 30, maybe 40 men. Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, elite troops. They moved in pairs, covering each other, professional and methodical. O'Malley raised his Thompson, beautiful weapon, machined steel, blued finish. He pulled the charging handle back. It didn't move. He pulled harder. Nothing. The bolt was frozen solid. Condensation from the warm tank interior had flashed, frozen the moment they hit the sub. Zero air. The tight tolerances of the precision weapon had locked it shut like a vault. O'Malley swore and slammed the gun against a tree. Ice crystals fell from the receiver. The bolt still wouldn't move. The Germans were 50 yards away and closing. Ritchie tried his carbine. The trigger clicked. The firing pin was frozen. Hendricks had his pistol. But a pistol against 40 riflemen was a joke. Webb didn't even have that. Danny looked down at the ugly stamped metal tube in his hands. The Grace gun, the piece of garbage, the $15 insult. The Germans were 40 yards away. He could see their faces now. Danny flipped open the dust cover. This was the safety. Just a hinged piece of metal. No switch, no button. He grabbed the crank handle on the right side of the gun and pulled. The bolt moved. Rough, gritty, but it moved. The gun was so crudely built, with such wide tolerances between the parts, that the ice had nothing to grip. The condensation just ran off the loose metal surfaces. The dirt and grit actually helped, keeping things from binding. Danny had 30 rounds in the magazine. He'd never fired this gun. He had no idea if it would work. The lead German soldier raised his rifle. Danny pointed the Grace gun like a garden hose and squeezed the trigger. The gun chugged. Not the sharp crack of a rifle, not the ripping burp of a Thompson, just a slow, heavy chug, chug, chug. 450 rounds per minute. So slow you could almost count the individual shots. The big 45 caliber slugs punched through the winter air. The lead German went down. The others scattered, diving behind trees. Danny kept firing. Chug, chug, chug. The gun sat in his hands like a rock. No climb, no twist. Just that slow, steady hammer. He wasn't aiming. The sights on a Grace gun were just welded nubs, useless. He was pointing. Instinct. Where his eyes looked, the bullets went. A German popped up behind a fallen log. Danny swung the barrel. Chug. The German dropped. Another moved left through the brush. Chug, chug. The movement stopped. The slowness of the gun saved him. Wham! If he'd had a Thompson firing 800 rounds per minute, his magazine would have been empty in 2 seconds of panic fire. The Grace gun gave him time. He could squeeze off single shots, 2 shots, 3. He could make the ammunition last. O'Malley was still fighting with his frozen Thompson, slamming it against the ground, trying to break the ice free. Ritchie's carbine was worthless. Hendricks fired his pistol twice and missed both times. It was just Danny and the piece of garbage. The Germans pulled back, not a rout, a tactical withdrawal. They'd hit unexpected resistance, and they were regrouping. Danny could see them moving through the trees, flanking left. His magazine was half empty. 15 rounds left. O'Malley looked at him with wild eyes. Why, how is that thing still working? Danny didn't answer. He didn't know. They couldn't stay in the ditch. Mortars were starting to fall, where O'Malley ordered them to pull back to a stone farmhouse 200 yards to the rear. They ran through waist-deep snow. Bullets snapped past their heads. Webb went down, shot through the leg. Hendricks grabbed him, dragged him. They crashed through the wooden door of the farmhouse and slammed it shut. The farmhouse was small, 1 room downstairs, stone walls, a kitchen table, a cold fireplace. The Belgian family who'd lived here had fled days ago. O'Malley and Ritchie started barricading the door with furniture. Danny reloaded the Grace gun. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the magazine. He had 2 magazines left, 60 rounds total. That was it. The back door exploded inward. 3 Waffen Sessa soldiers burst through, rifles raised. They were huge men in white winter camouflage. One carried a CG-44 assault rifle. The other 2 had Kar 98 bolt action rifles. The room was tiny, maybe 12 feet across. The lead German tried to swing his Kar 98 around. The rifle was 43 inches long. The barrel hit the doorframe with a wooden thunk. He struggled to correct, trying to get the muzzle pointed at O'Malley. O'Malley's Thompson was still frozen. Ritchie was on the other side of the room, his carbine jammed. Hendricks was dragging Webb away from the door. Danny was in the corner, 10 feet from the Germans. The grease gun had a wire stock that folded. With the stock collapsed, the gun was 22 inches long, barely longer than a large pistol. Danny didn't shoulder it, didn't aim it. He held it at his hip, stock folded, and fired from retention. Chug, chug. Though the slow rate of fire didn't matter at 10 feet, the massive .45 caliber bullets crossed the room in a tenth of a second. Each slug weighed twice what a rifle bullet weighed. They hit like hammers. The lead German went down. The second German tried to aim. Danny swung the barrel 6 inches left. Chug, chug. The second German fell. The third German, the one with the CG-44, got his weapon up. Danny was out of position, couldn't swing fast enough. O'Malley threw his frozen Thompson like a club. It hit the German in the face. The man staggered. Danny fired. Chug. The fight was over. 3 seconds. 3 dead men. A $15 stamped metal tube against the finest soldiers Germany had. Danny stood there, the barrel smoking, the smell of cordite choking the small room. His ears were ringing. His hands were numb. He looked at the grease gun, the crude welds, the stamped metal, the bent wire stock. It was still working. They held that farmhouse for 6 hours. The German infantry probed the building twice more. Both times, Danny and his ugly rattling tube drove them back. O'Malley finally got his Thompson working by heating the receiver over a fire. Richie fixed his carbine. But for those first critical hours, it was just Danny and the gun everyone had mocked. When the relief column from Boston finally arrived, Danny was sitting on the stone steps of the farmhouse, the grease gun across his knees. A tank rolled up. A lieutenant hopped out. "You boys all right?" O'Malley nodded. "We held." The lieutenant looked at the German bodies in the snow. He looked at Danny's weapon. "Son, is that a grease gun?" Danny looked down at it. The receiver was scorched black. The wire stock was bent. One of the welds had cracked. Heard those were pieces of junk. Danny ran his thumb over the rough stamped metal. He thought about the frozen ditch, the tiny farmhouse, the 3 SS soldiers. They work when everything else doesn't. The Battle of the Bulge raged for another month. Danny's unit pushed west to Bastogne, then east to the Siegfried line. He carried that grease gun through it all. He stopped caring about the ugly welds. He stopped wishing for a Thompson. Other tankers noticed. Word spread. The gun that worked when Thompsons froze. The gun that kept firing when everything else jammed. By the time they crossed the Rhine in March, half the tank crews had traded their Thompsons for grease guns. The Army tried to retire the M3 after the war. They wanted prettier weapons, but the tankers refused. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm. The grease gun served for 50 years, not because it was beautiful, not because it was prestigious, because when you're in a frozen ditch with 40 Germans closing in, you don't need a work of art. You need something that works. A Danny Kowalski survived the war. He came home to Detroit, got a job at the Ford plant, married a girl from his neighborhood. He had 3 kids. He never talked much about the war, but in his garage, hanging on 2 nails above his workbench, was a stamped metal tube with a wire stock, rough welds, crude construction, no serial number. He'd filed it off before he smuggled it home in his duffel. His son asked him about it once. "Dade, what is that thing?" "It looks like a grease gun." Danny was 70 years old. His hands shook with palsy, but he took the gun down, collapsed the stock, felt the weight of it. "That's exactly what it is," he said, "and it saved my life." If you're listening to this, and you're wondering what weapon you'd choose in that frozen forest, here's the truth. You don't choose based on what looks good in a display case. You choose based on what works when everything is falling apart. The Germans built masterpieces. We built tools. They lost. We won. Sometimes ugly is beautiful. Sometimes $15 is priceless. Next week, we're looking at the other side of the equation, the King Tiger, the heaviest, most powerful tank Germany ever built, and why it was actually a catastrophic failure. Until then, this is WW2 Battlegrounds.